everyone, so today let's learn top 200 drug names from 51 to 100. So 51st is Valtrex. Its generic is valacyclovir and it's used for viral infections like herpes and shingles. 52nd is Reactine. Its generic is cetirizine and it's used for relieving the symptoms of allergies like watery eyes, runny nose, sneezing, etc. 53rd is Diclectin. Its generic is doxylamine and pyridoxine, and it's used for nausea and vomiting in pregnancy. 54th is Vinpred. Its generic is prednisone, and it's used to decrease inflammation, also known as swelling. 55th is Imodium. Its generic is loperamide, and it's used for diarrhea. 56th is Macrobid. Its generic is nitrofurantoin, and it's used for urinary tract infections. 57th is Prevacid. Its generic is lansoprazole and it's used to reduce stomach acid. 58th is Norvasc. Its generic is amlodipine and it's used for hypertension. 59th is Wellbutrin. Its generic is bupropion and it's used for depression. 60 is Tramasad. Its generic is tramadol and acetaminophen and it's used for pain. 61 is Aspirin. Its generic is acetyl salicylic acid and it's used for pain, inflammation, fever, and blood thinning. 62nd is Vasicare. Its generic is solifenacin and it's used for overactive bladder or frequent urination. 63rd is Claritin. Its generic is loratadine and it's used for treating allergies. 64th is Xarelto. Its generic is rivaroxaban and it's used for blood thinning. 65th is Neurontin. Its generic is gabapentin and it's used for seizures and neuropathic pain. 66th is Clozaril. Its generic is clozapine and it's used for psychotic disorders like schizophrenia. 67th is Abilify. Its generic is aripiprazole and it's used for psychotic disorders like schizophrenia. 68th is Keppra. Its generic is levetiracetam and it's used for seizures. 69th is Axalon. Its generic is rivastigmine and it's used for dementia. 70 is Delicin. Its generic is clindamycin and it's used for bacterial infections. 71 is Gravel. Its generic is dimenhydrinate and it's used for nausea, vomiting, and dizziness. 72 is Benadryl. Its generic is diphenhydramine and it's used for symptoms of allergies. 73rd is Flomax. Its generic is tamsulosin and it's used for benign prostatic hyperplasia. 74th is Aleve. Its generic is naproxen and it's used for pain, inflammation, and fever. 75th is Vyvanse. Its generic is lisdexamfetamine and it's used for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. 76th is Periactin. Its generic is ciproheptadine and it's used for relieving allergy symptoms. 77th is Cymbalta. Its generic is duloxetine and it's used for depression. 78th is Diflucan. Its generic is fluconazole and it's used for fungal and yeast infections. 79th is Lamictal. Its generic is lamotrigine and it's used for epilepsy or seizures. 80 is Atarax. Its generic is hydroxyzine and it's used for symptoms of itching due to allergies. 81 is Ciprodex. Its generic is ciprofloxacin and dexamethasone and it's used for bacterial ear infections. 82nd is Oragel. Its generic is benzocaine and it's used for pain relief and numbing medication for oral care. 83 is HP Pack. Its generic is lansoprazole, amoxicillin, and claritomycin and it's used to treat H. pylori infection. 84th is Vigamox. Its generic is moxifloxacin and it's used for bacterial eye infections. 85th is Arawa. Its generic is leflunomide and it's used for rheumatoid arthritis. 86th is Colcrese. Its generic is colchicine and it's used to treat gout. 87th is Talitone. Its generic is chlorthalidone and it's used to treat hypertension. 88th is Dilantin. Its generic is phenytoin and it's used for seizures. 89th is Rheumatrax. Its generic is methotrexate, and it's used for rheumatoid arthritis. 90 is Metonia. Its generic is metoclopramide, and it's used for stomach emptying after surgery. 91st is Rocephin. Its generic is ceftriaxone, and it's used for bacterial infection. 92nd is Nitrostat. Its generic is nitroglycerin, and it's used for chest pain. 93rd is Luracil. Its generic is baclofen, and it's used for muscle spasticity. 94th is Cytotec. Its generic is misoprostol, and it's used to treat stomach ulcers. 95th is Proscar. Its generic is finasteride, and it's used for benign prostatic hyperplasia. 96th is Lamisil. Its generic is terbinafine, and it's used for fungal infections like ringworm, etc. 97th is Sudafed. Its generic is pseudoephedrine, and it's used for temporary relief of stuffy nose and sinus pain or pressure. 98th is Phenergan. Its generic is promethazine, and it's used for allergies, difficulty sleeping, and nausea. 99th is Carafate. Its generic is sucralfate, and it's used to prevent ulcers in the intestines. And 100 is Bactrim or Cetra. Its generic is sulfamethoxazole and trimethoprim, and it's used for bacterial infections. Thanks for watching and see you next time.